Welcome to Fortify Your Future, a podcast for professionals that have executive oversight of or aspirations of leading the safety and security function for their organization. My name is Ken Carrasco, and joining me today on the podcast is Bryan Banta. Welcome, Bryan.
Thanks, Ken. Glad to be here again.
Hey, well, this is our fourth segment of five planned in terms of this series. And this particular segment's called Reflection and Improvement. Now, this key area, when I look at this and looking through, your book, Leadership Uncomplicated, it's really key. And one of the things that, I find real interesting about this particular segment is how you introduce reflection for leaders. And so can you give us some context around that portion of this, and before we start digging a little bit deeper in sort of how we address teams and individuals, but give us your thoughts in terms of generally about this particular area that's key for you, Bryan.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, really glad to be back talking about this. And I often really do believe that reflection is something that it can be easily overlooked in the grand scheme of a lot of things we've already talked about in terms of leadership, delivering results, and, feedback and recognition and all these things. Taking the time to reflect and absorb sort of what's happening and pausing it can just be easily overlooked amongst all those other things which tend to, at least on the surface, take priority. But I want to make the argument that I think this component needs to always take precedence over many of the others as a leader, because reflection, if you really boil this down, so we'll talk a little bit about reflection and improvement. Reflection is ultimately what turns your experiences into wisdom, right? And that wisdom, when it's applied to drive improvement and development, is what ultimately creates impact. So it's really critical to understand as a leader that you cannot improve what you're unaware of, right? Which means that real growth starts with awareness, and reflection is the mechanism that allows you to pause and see what is working, what's not working, what's possible, and ultimately what your strengths are. We used to have this saying back in the day. I hear it floating around even today in different forms, but it was, if you can measure it, you can improve it, right? And it kind of comes from sort of that data-driven decision-making process. But reflection is how you understand that data, how you reflect on the data, how you are understanding where you're at and where your team's at in order to begin to understand the insights to make improvements. So ultimately, think of it as reflection shows you kind of the truth, right? And improvement is what you decide to do with that truth. And that's why these two things are really critical. And for leaders, again, I understand and recognize that there's a lot going on in the world of a people leader. And depending on what sort of team you're leading, it's, there's high stakes at sometimes, and there's a lot to get caught up in. But giving yourself permission and committing to taking the time to pause and reflect gives you that mindfulness to understand or to see some areas that maybe might get overlooked as well. So it's really important, and it takes practice, right? Because we get into this mode of execute all the time, deliver. But you really have to take the time for yourself, and it's very important for you to do that for yourself. But also, if you're going to help others, you first have to understand you, right? And then reflect on what you're driving and how you're helping coach your team, etc. So some of the things, if I'll just kind of speak kind of briefly on this, recognizing that many leaders kind of stop at awareness, right? They'll see something, they'll become aware of something, but they might even try to address it short term, but they never take the time to truly continue to reflect and create an environment to build the habits to ultimately truly change. And that's where reflection is the starting point to really doing that key component of how do you understand and then change behavior. We talked about a little bit about, what's recognized is what's, really focused on in teams. And so you're recognizing something you become aware of through reflection. And the development side is really looking at it in terms of, moving away from I should do this to I will do this, right? So it's really, really important. And the other thing, this is something back in our Cisco days, I was always very thankful for too. is reflection so critical at understanding your strengths, right? And as a people leader, it's also important for you to reflect and understand and maybe help the identification of other people's strengths. This comes into play very, very importantly, especially with people coming from public sector into private sector and helping them translate and recognize strengths and how they apply in the private sector. But in so improvement after reflection isn't about fixing weakness, right? It's more about amplifying your strengths. And that's something that I took away from Cisco after being there for so long. It was really eye-opening early in my career to like, wow, what's focusing on my strength? And so one of my more favorite quotes, I'll just throw a quick plug out there for a really great book, one of my favorites, Way of the Peaceful Warrior by Dan Millman. And in that book, one of the characters, Socrates, says the secret to change is to focus all your energy not on fighting the old, but on building the new. So that's where it's very similar to focusing on your strength. Now, what is a strength, right? Reflection helps you understand, identify, and translate the strength. But a strength is something that you do well, but that it energizes you, right? And this is where it takes a lot of reflection, whether you're an individual contributor or a team leader. We all do things, we all have skills that we can do something very well, but it doesn't really energize us, right? It's like back in my career, I remember I could manage projects extremely well, like really organized, but it didn't fuel my energy and my passion. I didn't feel alive by managing projects. I did it really well though, so I wouldn't necessarily consider that one of my strengths, even though others might go like, you did amazing. No, like my strengths were in other areas. So leaders taking the time to reflect, what are your strengths, what do you do well? um, do you mind if I just share a quick example kind of why
Right
it's so
in.
important to understand, like, and be mindful of your strengths and why? Okay, good. So reflection helps you understand it. So I'll give you an example. Let's say you do a lot of public speaking, and let's say I'm a developer or a tech. I'm just using these in general terms. Your strength is if you think about like on a spectrum, strength being like you're really, really good at something, really, really bad at something, right? Now you are a natural public speaker, so your strength is up here, right? Now let's say I'm a developer, or I'm amazing at that, but at my public speaking, people say you got to get better at public speaking, Bryan. Well, I'm down here, right? So if I spend a lot of time reflecting and trying to get better at something that isn't my strength, I can maybe get to here. I'll spend a lot of energy. I have a long way to go to get to where you are. Whereas if you do it, you'll get to here, right? So it's really important to understand, focus on your strengths, right? Focus on the things that you do well and they energize you, and how natural that can be. And a lot of energy comes from that. And as a leader, one of the things that you can do is help people better understand, by really reflecting, giving yourself time and opportunity to really think through that for yourself and for others, and really focus on driving that. And so that gets into the development portion. So then how do you help people that, hey, did you know, Ken, you're an amazing speaker? Oh, I never really thought. I just kind of get up and do my thing. I don't really know. Yes, you are. Let's develop that. So the reflection turns into that wisdom, and that turns into how you make that impact. And then you as a leader can really help forge people's journeys and their growth opportunities through that. So um, really important, I think, just to always be thinking about, again, that pause, taking the time gives you those insights as to, oh, I never thought of it that way. I just thought everyone had to do public speaking. Well, you and I both know that's an example of, second to like, major illness and death. That's like one of the biggest fears that most people have, right? Unless it's your strength and you kind of enjoy doing it. So it's important as a leader to understand these are the moments that you get to reflect and understand what that means. And for the developer, like in that example I gave, as a developer, I go, wow, yeah, I don't like public speaking, but boy, I can develop the next innovative AI solution that you can't even possibly comprehend. You can talk publicly about it, but I'll be the one that builds it for you. That type of thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. For me, how it resonates with me is self-awareness, right? It's
Right.
really, really key, and taking the time uh, to actually really digest, the information about yourself, and what you're doing, and how you're doing it. And I couldn't agree more. I tell people, if I could do it all over again, I would have spent less time trying to be more balanced. And again, I think it may have been sort of the influence of the time as well, the period of time where it was important to work on things that people would articulate as weaknesses and say, well, these are areas in which, you should improve upon, and spending time there. But what I found, and I don't know why, it took reflection to really think about this in terms of understanding, but you're absolutely right. Marginally, if I spend the same amount of time working on a strength that I'm working on a weakness, marginally I'm going to improve, right, dramatically more
Right.
on what I'm already strong at. And so today I tell people, hey, double and triple down on what you're good at
Yeah.
and what your strengths are. It makes total sense. And I'm not saying to neglect the things that you need to improve upon, but when you're allocating your time, your resource of time, I think that is so important to understand that point, and making sure that you're spending more of your time on the things that you're already good at, because marginally you're just going to separate
Right.
yourself from everyone else. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's so key. Yeah, and something that you're kind of keying in on there too, and I'll bring it back around to kind of as a people leader, where you're kind of looking across, leading a whole department or a team. Improvement, development, these insights that we're talking about here, this is fundamental leadership mindset, right? It's the growth mindset. The best leaders, they're always developing skills. They're always giving, time and energy to understanding different perspectives, driving, resilience, being adaptable, right? Because it's one thing, the self-awareness is super key for you as a leader, but you can translate that into the self-awareness in others of what their strengths are and where they can spend their time. And one of the things I see work out quite well is, you're right, and a lot of people feel like I want to be very well-rounded, and yeah, there's, you can put time and energy into areas where you're weaker at. But doubling down on the areas of strength are what's key. And then as a team, what happens is you become well-rounded, not necessarily as individuals, but as a team, you're well-rounded. So let's say we're on a team and I do really good tactically, but you have this strategic mind of like, just even before we get going, why would we take you out of that and say, well, now go run in this tactical situation versus strategic? Because you're so good at it. We benefit, right, by allowing Ken to be the strategician, right, on what we're doing and why and how to do it, and then we execute. And then it fuels you because you're like, this is what I love to do, and I am great at this. I love it. And so you get energy capitalized around your entire team because they're focusing on where they're all really, really good. The job of the leader is to create the environment where you all can reflect and support one another in doing that. And that's what's really key. I think for the leadership mindset to understand, it's quite interesting. So the moment, like as a leader, you feel like I've arrived, I'm now here, and I'm great. Actually the moment you start falling behind. The best example, Ken, that I can give you, and I'll just share a personal, experience. As you know, I've been, studying and training and teaching in the martial arts for many years, and I remember, starting out very traditionally. You start out, as a white belt, and you're always like, I want to be a black belt someday. That's in most martial arts, that's kind of the journey. What's fascinating is as you go through that, I remember the day that I achieved my black belt, and you think about all the knowledge and wisdom and technique and skill that you've acquired over that journey. The reality is, and I'm sure most martial artists out there would agree, once you achieve, your initial first degree black belt, you realize you're actually just at the beginning. You're actually just starting with your knowledge, which is weird because when you first start as like young white belt, you're like, well, when I get there, I've attained no, it's actually the beginning. And funny enough, I find symbolism in all this. By the time you get there and you start training now with your black belt, it begins over time to fade. And almost in many ways, at least the black belts that I'm familiar with, your belt begins to fade back to white. And I just love that, right? So it's really important as a leader to always be humble, and always be like the embodiment of giving your teams the ability to reflect and ponder and think about things and support them. Um, there's a wonderful quote. It's by if it's another book out there, Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, and I love this because it really truly is. I've seen this play out so many times, but it's that the quote is, quote, "In the beginner's mind there are many possibilities, in the experts there are few." And it's absolutely true. I mean, think, oh, you go into something and you think, oh, look at what's possible. We can do all this. But then someday you become an expert. Oh, actually, no, all my experience, we can only do this. But that's really not true. So keeping that beginner's mind all the time as a leader, um, it really does help you, because what happens is you have a lot of expertise in in ways that might be looked upon as like old school, right? And if you embrace folks that are coming in with new ideas, not only do you learn, but you can again reflect on what do you really need to be doing, and how do you help fuel others' journeys and capitalize on their strengths in a way to then achieve real creativity and innovation in whatever work domain you're in, versus, well, no, I'm the expert, do as I say. Like that can get you into trouble because you're missing the opportunity to help people understand where they're at, where they can go, and then let them build those skills and improve upon that. And it's just more fun as a leader because you get to see people light up with excitement, and ideation, rather than, I think there is a better way, but Bryan's telling me to do it like this. I don't know if that's the best way to do it. You're missing an opportunity there. So staying really, humble, keeping that beginner's mind perspective is just really important.
Yeah, there's some things when you talk about, being open to learning things, no matter how long you've spent, right, doing things, whether, being a leader or um, managing people, and you tend to fall back on the things that you're comfortable with, the things that things that have worked in the past, and so your tendency is to fall back and 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 focus in on those things. So keeping an open mind is always key and important. I In this particular example, in reading your book, you talk about retrospectives, team meetings. The application is with team meetings and retrospectives. And I hadn't really thought about that before, right? That's not something that I really, at least in the context in which you've presented it. Can you talk a little bit more about that? You touched on it, but can you talk a little bit more about retrospectives, team meetings, and how those fit in to the overall picture of improvement?
Yeah, no, it's great. I mean, retrospectives are sort of a staple in the world of Agile, which is just wonderful. Think of it as the moment of team reflection, right? Together. So I tend to really encourage teams. They can be done on a regular cadence. It depends on how you're operationally set up, or after a large project, or after a large release, or however you want to structure it. Anytime you want to reflect and bring people together and do that as a team, it's just really important. So gathering your team together. I tend to, when doing this, I'd recommend, somewhere between 60 and 90 minutes, depending on size of team, magnitude of project, etc. No more than 90. Human beings don't do well beyond 90 minutes for anything. So, but usually around 60 minutes. You can even do it for 30, depending if you have a small team. But really going through the exercise, and I'm also a big fan when you're doing a retrospective, it's really great to visualize the work. So you can set up, sort of the old flip chart, or nowadays do a virtual whiteboard, and just do a start, stop, continue column. And it's really nice. So what are the things you need to start doing as a team? Again, you're reflecting on the experience you've all had about project X, Y, or Z, right? Or a situation you've had to overcome together as a team. And you want to learn together from that. So what do you want to start doing as a result of this newfound wisdom? What are the things you need to stop doing as a result, or the things you're doing well that you want to continue? And it really helps to just throw those up visually, so that the team, everyone can align. And what that does is it just helps the team. It level sets everyone around exactly what we're talking about, versus leaving it for interpretation for each individual, and just work through that and talk through that. These sessions go so well. They're really kind of low expectation sessions, meaning there's not a lot of like, oh, you have You just come, you provide feedback, and then you take those, you capture them, and then you turn those into opportunities to improve the team. So it's a wonderful exercise, and you do that on a regular basis. You're always going to, again, encourage openness. You're going to encourage honesty. And then the big win for you as a leader is just doing this alone and giving your team permission to share along. What do we want to start, stop, and continue doing within our team and operations? You're already setting yourself apart as a leader versus never doing this and just coming in all the time and dictating to your team what they're going to do or the lessons they should know. So it's a huge win. It's a huge win, and your teams will really appreciate that. And then the only other piece of advice I'll give around retrospective meetings are, if you only need 30 minutes, only use 30 minutes, right? I think meetings are great, but always be mindful of your team's time. And if you feel like you're trying to fill, then tell everyone, okay, that's a wrap. We're good. Great insights. On to the next thing. So just always be mindful of the time. But again, like I said, 60 minutes usually a sweet spot to go through the exercise. But it's a wonderful tool. And something else I'd recommend maybe for a leader to think about, just as an individual people leader, sort of model for also kind of building upon the retrospective, is a very, very simple tool that I've used many times, where it's just, it's these 3 R's: reflect, reframe, and refine, where you're just reflecting on what's happened. What did you learn? Then you reframe that into, how can I see it differently? This is where you can leverage the insights from a retrospective from some of the folks across your entire team. And then what's the opportunity? I always say to folks, one of the things I love about Agile is the mindset of being agile is really around, how do you turn risk or change, which is going to happen, how do you turn that into opportunity and value? So this reframe is a way to use our thinking, okay, this is a reality. This is how do I turn this into value that I can deliver to the business, or opportunity that I can create for my team to deliver, and then refine it, right? And that's really where the retrospective comes in as well. The constant refinement and small adjustments over time, because something that is really key to think about as a leader, and retrospectives and the reflect and refine can do, is understand that small consistent improvement over time is always going to beat like large dramatic big change that just doesn't last. The way I like to think of that, back in sort of my law enforcement days, or I'll put it in perspective of like firefighting, because everyone hears about, like, we're doing a fire drill at work, right? It's the fundamental principle you hear about all the time, of the difference between firefighting and fire prevention, right? Or crime investigation versus crime prevention, right? You want to stay ahead of things, right? It's much easier, and you create in the environments and behavior that are conducive of the prevention of these things in the first place, rather than fighting them when they go off. It's a completely different mindset. So really key. And again, this as a team can help you maintain that perspective of, how do we stay ahead of the big situation that just blew up in front of our face, so we can avoid it in the future, or just stay ahead of it.
Great. Well, so you've talked about reflection for leaders. We've talked about retrospectives for teams. Now let's start talking about the individuals, the individual development plans. And this is an area in which I'm a huge proponent in terms of leaders really emphasizing this element, like we've never done before. Because when I was coming up in my career, the onus was on us, right? We had to own our personal development. It's like, if there was resources available, it was really up to us as individuals, that it's our responsibility, right? We have to own our career development, our personal development, and really how to take action. And my position today is, I believe leaders have to be more than just providing the resources. You actually have to be participatory in the development plan with your team, with these individuals. And the reason I say that is because I think for the most part, when we talk about sort of this new generation of folks and new leaders in terms of what motivates them, having purpose in their role, the fact that the career ladder doesn't really exist like it did for us early in our careers. And so there's talk more about career stories and how we help uh, the individuals, contributors on our teams is critical in terms of what they're doing, not just in their role with us today, but what their career story is going to look like and how we're going to be contributing to helping them develop and pursue that next step, whether it's with our company that we're currently working with or they move on. And I think that's so critical for us to recognize how we need to modify how we incentivize our teams and motivate our people, that we have to do more now than we ever had to do before when it comes to their individual development plans. So
Right.
talk to us about what that means from your perspective, Bryan.
Yeah. Well, first off, I want to say, I want to go back to what you kind of said there about owning your career path. I absolutely agree. We all own our own career path. Make no mistake about it. You are the captain of your ship, and it is on you to fuel that journey. However, to your point, when you have you as an individual, yep, you are going from point A to point B in your career. When you marry that with a leader who understands and is truly supportive and has created this growth environment, right? That's where absolute magic happens. That's where you become best company to work for. That's where you create the next big innovation. That's the relationship that creates greatness. And you're right. Many people, I remember, a few years back, I would ask a lot of the folks I worked with early in career, if you could have a position more aligned with purpose, and purpose meaning something that you find purpose in, or a $10,000 raise, what would you choose? And every single one of them was like, I want purpose. So and I love that, because I'm a believer that if you truly align around purpose over promotion, but the promotion will eventually come, like that will come. So getting away from like, I just want to climb the ladder, to I want to find meaning and make impact in a positive way, both for me personally in my personal life, but also at work. So yes, I think it's so important to understand where you as a people leader come together the people on your team, and they need to the one that's the drive, but you're the catalyst that makes that happen. I've always said this: as a leader, you're either the catalyst or the flypaper, right? When somebody meets you, you're either helping them accelerate to a new velocity, or you're the flypaper that stops them cold. And again, reflection is going to help you understand. Ooh, maybe I'm being flypaper to people, right? Um, the other thing to recognize in how you do that as you begin to explore development plans for each individual on your team is recognize that oftentimes, I don't want to say younger, but oftentimes the newer folks on your team who are fresh in whatever technical discipline you're in, they're bringing, whether they're fresh out of a course or an academy or training, whatever it is, they're bringing some of the most cutting edge tools and techniques to the table. So they may not have as many years of experience as you as a people leader, but they bring these techniques. But where that marries quite well is with you and your years of experience and the wisdom you bring, right? So you help guide and you help nurture and you help mold those techniques into kind of like where that meets the real world, right? That's good in theory, academia. Now let's hit the real world. But that's the role you play as a leader. And so as you craft these individual development plans for each person along their journey, where's your organization going? And how does that match with where you as an individual are going? And you help bring those paths together. And then the reason why you document and create an individual development plan, and I outline this in the book as well, is because that just helps with the accountability, right? It's just like when you go to the gym, you say, here's the exercises, you record everything. It just creates accountability, and it helps you align with your people on how are you making progress on that journey of learning and development. And it's circular in the sense that you're always doing the reflection. Where am I going? This is where I want to go. This is what I'm learning. How am I applying that? Right. And then you're working that out with all of your team members. The thing that I love, to your point, I think that you were getting to here, is this is such a critical component, because it's getting the new skills and honing the new skills that drive a lot of that energy. It drives a lot of purpose. It takes time though, right? So as a leader, you kind of have to, like, you have to manage this, because if you spend 100% of your time just on delivering, here are the deliverables we have to get done, and no time is carved out for this process, this is where burnout happens, right? Because you're not engaging in what I would refer to as the human being's superpower, which is the untapped potential of the human being. So it's so much fun, because what you'll find is when you support people's talent, you help drive their development in whatever area is important to them, and to where the organization's going, right? You will never ever be ceased to be amazed at what your people will come up with and the solutions they will drive. And as a people leader, they'll make you look great. I mean, it sounds weird because you may not be doing the work, but that's not your job. You're empowering and developing those that will. But that in and of itself is the skill set that you now have as a leader, right? We don't put a lot of stock in that, because we're trained, our brains are trained to, like, I do the work and then get recognized for the work. But with a leader, it's simply creating the environment to allow the growth and work to occur. And I think organizations need to do a better job of recognizing leaders when they go, wow, Ken's team is doing all this amazing work. Well, Ken's doing a great job. What are the things Ken's actually done? We don't really know, because he's not project managing, whatever it is. But clearly his people are just knocking out the park. We need to be giving more recognition to Ken, right? Because there's something going on there that's absolutely amazing, because his people are engaged. They love being here. They're not burned out. They're high energy, and they're very innovative. All sort of the traits of doing great work. So IDP, the individual development plan, is a mechanism and a tool to sort of bring you together with your team and your people to carve out what that looks like, and then hold each other accountable and execute on that.
Yeah, it's again critical, and especially today, I think in the times that we are currently living in, and you're thinking about sort of new ways to incentivize and motivate people. I think we, even in the things that, individual development plans, IDP has been around for a long time,
Right.
but I think how we approach them and effectively participate with individuals to assist them, going beyond just coaching, right? Going beyond just pointing them at resources, is going to be really more important as we continue to navigate forward, as you mentioned, with new folks coming on board. You know how I like data, and I'm going to reference some data
Sure.
in this closing portion of our session here today. But I'm looking through some of this. There's a couple data points that really resonate with me. Companies that invest in employee development report 11% higher profitability, and their programs experience 24% higher volunteer retention rates.
Right.
So again, we're not just saying this because we think or believe it. We know that the data reinforces why this is so critical. Now, I remember years ago, specifically at Cisco, we had a lot of access to resources from an education standpoint and pathways to acquire certain skills. And I don't know if it's just me, but I don't see that same level of investment by companies that are, let's say, larger enterprise organizations, especially some of the newer ones. And
Right.
I'd like to get your thoughts and opinion about that, because we had clear pathways there, and although we I think I talk about being participatory as a leader and really engaging in the plans. We didn't necessarily have that. It was like, hey, if you want to do this, here's some resources that you can take, and you're sort of on your own. And it took, I, as an individual who did not have I didn't have a undergrad degree. I stopped at my AA, and then found myself just needing more very specific type of skill development that these courses, these educational opportunities were much more effective for me to take and pursue develop the skills I needed in my role. And so I chose to really invest my time there with the Cisco University, if you will.
Yeah.
But you don't see those same types of offerings today. Why not, Bryan?
Yeah,
Why do
so
you think?
that's a wonderful call out. I will say this, and I will admit, there's a reason why I spent almost 2 decades with Cisco as an organization, and I just use them as an example here. One, we have that in common, but I think the big differentiator. So lots of organizations have resources available to employees to learn new skills or build new skills. I think the big differentiator, especially early on at Cisco for me, was the quality of leaders. Because many times going to my leaders, and I'm like this with my teams, you know, you're lucky enough on your team to have people that really do want to truly invest in their growth and development, because a lot of people just want to kind of stay this status quo. But for the folks that really do want to learn, and many people today, like I mentioned earlier, the purpose over promotion kind of concept, they really do. They want to learn. I mean, we live in a world that's changing every single day. People want to learn and they want to know how they fit in that world. The thing that I think Cisco had that was just absolutely amazing, and I know this from personal experience, is when you go to your leader and you want to learn, they weren't just like, yeah, put it on the plan and talk to me later. They were actively engaged in supporting you in taking that step. In fact, I will go so far as to say, when you and I met, Ken, years ago, it was because I had gone to my manager and said, hey, I want to go, given my background, I want to go and work over here at Cisco in the security area. And I had support to do that. In fact, when I remember doing the rotation with you guys early on. My team and my manager were paying my salary, and I was 100% full time working, in those early days, and that's
Yeah.
phenomenal. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? You're right. In other organizations, someone coming up to you and saying, "Hey, I want to go work for this other team for 3, 6 months, 12 months. I'm going to do zero work for you, and you're my manager." And it's unheard of. But you know what? There's a reason why people come back to those environments. There's a reason why, I mean, it transformed my career. We got to meet. Lots of amazing things happened as a result of doing that. So that's the differentiator: is truly active participation and engagement and wisdom from your people leader who is absolutely authentically invested in your development versus, oh yeah, I guess we have to go through this once a year and we have to go, it's like this exercise. I mean, I take it as far with my teams, all of my teams. I always even ask them, as far as, I will say, look, we have our goals and the development that we want to do, and I want to support you. But I even go so far as to tell me, what is something I can do as your people leader to support you in your personal lives throughout this next year? Meaning, like, if you need more time with your kids, your significant other, whatever it is in your personal life, more time, you want more time away. I want them to know, like, I'm interested in what I can do to support you in that. Not how can I help you learn the skill to do more things at work. None of that, because your personal and professional lives are not mutually exclusive. And I just want my teams to always understand, like, hey, we're in this together. We've come together under the banner of this company, but we have come together as human beings to accomplish a mission. But that doesn't mean that we're not going to do that in a way that we don't support one another, in ways that just go beyond, like, just getting the project done or the thing done or the widget built, right? And that, I think, is one of the big reasons why Cisco always holds a special place in my heart, because the leaders, not all of them, but the leaders there, more or less, the Cisco culture was absolutely, yep. It was the I can versus I can't, right? What's the famous saying? Those who say they can and those who say they can't are both usually right. But at Cisco, it was always okay, let's do it. You have an idea, go for it. I'll give you time. And the funny thing about Cisco, and you and I both saw this, it wasn't like, oh yeah, you waste all this time over here doing that. Most of the time was, no, you accomplished everything you needed to do and then some, because it just fuels that inner passion to want to learn and grow and develop new skills. It's just really, really important. So again, what was the differentiator? The leader taking an active participatory role. Some people need more from you than others, right? Some might go, I really need your help in identifying where I want to go. Others might know, I know exactly where I want to go. Help me get there. So you have to kind of play along that spectrum, which is also like a really fun aspect of being a people leader. But as momentum gains there, it's so exciting to see people come alive, to see the things that they can accomplish. To me, that's the most rewarding thing as a leader. So huge opportunity there, and it's a wonderful. And I hope more organizations, to your point, Ken. Yeah, we don't make up the data. It's clearly there. Like, I don't know why more organizations don't spend more time saying that the leader. We have the resources. It's the leader that is, again, the catalyst or the flypaper.
100% agree. I couldn't agree more with you, Bryan, on your take. Hey, another great session. Really
Yeah.
appreciate really appreciate you being here. Looking forward to our final installment, where we'll be discussing relationships. And for my money, the most important aspect of all of this, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Bryan, thank you again for joining us.
You bet. Always a pleasure. Thanks for having me.